Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to come and talk at this really interesting symposium. So the difficult thing about this course, this talk, of course, is because I am in lots of ways following very, very eminent speakers, and I feel really what I'm doing is telling you a little bit about a sort of institutional experiment in Professor Wyman's ideas, because we saw his evidence, we heard him talk, and we were very convinced to try and use these methods and to try and be brave and to implement them across the whole of the institution. So it is a very early days, we're very new into this, but it hopefully will be interesting for you to find out how we are doing it, and please ask me questions. I would very happily try and answer them. And given that we're talking about active learning, I will try not to lecture you for too long and to leave some questions, time for questions at the end. So Imperial College is a very strange university. It is focused all entirely on STEM subjects. So we have no social sciences, we have no humanities. It's science, technology, engineering, maths, medicine, and a business school. But it's a very successful university. It brings in an awful lot of research money. It's very successful on the international scale. It attracts a lot of very good quality students from around the world. And although it's best known as a very research-intensive institution, it has always valued education. It has always been a place where education is taken seriously, but perhaps not so visibly, because this is discipline experts who are teaching and trying to teach well, but not necessarily doing it with the right information. Our mission in the long term is to try and make sure that excellence carries on and is there for the future in a changing world where the need for education is not staying still. So in trying to apply Professor Wyman's ideas, we are trying to prepare our institution for the future of education as we maybe can predict it. So we think at least we are the first top research-intensive university to implement these ideas of evidence-based transformation across the whole university. So we've done this on every single undergraduate and postgraduate taught course. And we're also, at the same time, spent a good deal of time and money to change our digital and online technology to help support us in this change. And we thought it was very important to where possible, involve students in this change, so that right from the start they were active partners and they understood that their world as students was changing. And of course, following the very good advice in Professor Wyman's book, and we recognized that this sort of change was going to take a lot of money and a lot of support from the institutional hierarchy and leadership. So we've already heard a lot of this from Professor Wyman, but we think now really there is irrefutable evidence that active learning is much more effective across every discipline that has been looked at. As far as we know, it comes out as being a more effective way of teaching and a better way of learning. And as Professor Wyman mentioned briefly, also a very much more enjoyable way of teaching, which helps not only student engagement, but also faculty engagement with the business of teaching students. And there's calls for a change in how we as universities educate our students from North America, but also across the whole sector. The higher education sector is global nowadays. Every university recruits students from all around the world. And there's an increased marketization and also an increased competition for getting the best students and for producing the best graduates. There is also a changing societal need for what our graduates are going to be required to do. So we are now teaching generations of people who will live longer, who will have multiple careers perhaps in their lifetime, and will perhaps be training at university for careers and specialisms that don't yet even exist. So we're trying to prepare our students for a changing but slightly uncertain future. And in the UK context, we also have very important changes which actually helped us in considering changing the institution. We have had for a long time the Research Excellence Framework, the REF, which allocates money to universities based on various metrics of how well they perform in the research arena. And basically it rewards individuals and departments and institutions based on the amount of research funding they bring in and the amount of good quality research papers they produce. And the government thinks that this very much has helped with keeping research active and credible and aligned to demand. But it also recognises that there has been a slight cost in that has undervalued teaching. And so recently in the UK, the government introduced the Teaching Excellence Framework, which attempts to measure good teaching and what good teaching might be, and to reward that in a similar way. Of course, it's almost impossible to measure good teaching, but taking account of good teaching and the government valuing it has actually helped us implement some of these changes at our institution. So what we've tried to do, what we are attempting to do, is to follow Professor Wyman's advice and try and make our learning more active, more challenging and engaging, and make it more authentic, making it more real for the students. And that means making, not just positioning the learning in a real context, but also having a managed authenticity that gives the students a chance to learn in a safe but challenging space, that it requires them to solve problems and actively use the material we're teaching them, rather than just try and learn it for the next exam. So we want our students to actively engage in this process and to take those skills forward with them into their future, because they're very much the same skills that they will use if they are going into research and academia, but also into many businesses who will want them to be problem solvers, who will want them to handle big data and come up with good ideas. All of these challenges are very similar to the ones that are practiced in a sort of scaffolded and supported way in this idea of active learning. So in following this process, our first stage was to look at a fundamental review of all of the curricula across the whole institution. And this is very much the stage we are embedded in at the moment. This curriculum review process is actually due to finish at the end of this month. And so all of our courses at the moment are very busily engaged in reviewing their curricula. And we're starting with the undergraduate curricula, but we are moving on secondary to the taught postgraduate courses, although some people who are engaged in both at the same time and want to review courses that are both undergraduate and postgraduate. And we wanted this curriculum review to look for opportunities for transforming the teaching and learning process. So we wanted the faculty themselves, the disciplines themselves, to first look at their curriculum and identify opportunities where they would like to change things. So this isn't just about changing the curriculum content and updating the content. It's about looking for opportunities for active learning within that content. We also wanted them to look at opportunities for making their curriculum more inclusive and more diverse and accepting of a wider range of culture and approaches. And that's not just culture from an international context, it's also the different learning cultures that students bring in to their study. Often the traditional lecture-based approach assumes a sort of all of the students are the same and very much teaches to an average student. We wanted to try and look for opportunities to recognise a wider range of starting points and try and think about this culture that students bring and the experience that students bring. And if we can help them do some more active learning together, they can use that difference to actually help each other learn. And to help support this, we've also spent quite a lot of time and effort developing our digital and online offering, both to support the active learning within classrooms and beyond that in the wider sense across the institution.